Dang it. Morning, Bob Canote out here at Camp Chaos, going to give you a little bit of insight regarding the engine stands that you see that we use out here. They're quite a bit different than the ones you might be familiar with, which would be one like this right here. And you can buy these from your local parts store, Summit Racing, Jags, any number of places. This type of stand has a frame that has casters on it. And this one has 4. There's 2 up front, 2 in the back. A lot of these will only have 1 up front. I really recommend that you get this type that has 4, because with just 1 caster on the end of this tube, they tend to tip over. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. So it's got attached to the back of this frame a vertical member. And this vertical member has a large bushing attached to the end. And inside of this bushing, you got a smaller one that has a hole that you got this handle attached to. And to the front of this bushing, you've got this mounting plate. And the mounting plate is semi-universal. Doesn't work on some of the smaller engines. You can see that there's slots cut in it, 1 for each arm. You've got these bolts with nuts on the back side that you can loosen and tighten, and rotate these arms up and down and slide them in and out. And so doing, you can usually find a place where you can get all 4 of these arms to bolt to the bell housing flange on most engines. Now the trick here is, of course, to get the center of gravity of the engine block with all the stuff in it right about in the middle of that tube right there. But it's not difficult to do, and it gets easy over time. Now, this big bushing in the back, see if I can do this without dropping the handle out. Okay, you pull that pin, and every 90 degrees, they've got another hole that you can slide the pin in. So you have a choice of 4 positions to put your engine in. And if you got a 90-degree V8, that's probably really all you need. You could actually drill a few more holes in that thing. But now this is what I used to use before I developed these new stands. And there's nothing wrong with this engine stand except that these things weigh about 175 pounds more than a cast iron Chevy V8. It's a big old thing. And it's only 5.3 liters as opposed to 7, 8 liters, that sort of thing. So another problem is that it's going to be 50% longer than a V8 as well. So you've got all that weight way out in front of this mounting plate right here. And the farther that weight is out front, the more load you put on this bearing surface right here, and the more difficult it is to turn the engine to a new position. Not normally a problem when the block is empty or you just got the crank in it, but when you start putting other things in it, then it gets really difficult to move. The other thing is that all that weight applies a torque load down here. And it really, on the engine stands that I was using earlier, really bent the engine, or this whole thing, forward. And the engine was just, it seemed like this whole thing was on the point of collapsing. I mean, you walk by an engine and it starts moving. That's a little scary. It got to the point where I actually, before I left the shop at night, I would put blocks under the engine so that I wouldn't walk into the shop in the morning and find the whole thing on the floor. You get tired of that after a while. So this stand right here, I saw one like this when I was in college in the early 70s. I was in the industrial arts program at one of the state schools. And this diesel shop that we visited had an engine stand that was very much like this. It had a frame that went around the engine. It had mounts that bolted directly to the mounting points, normal mounting points on the cylinder block. And then it had some sort of a small stabilizer arm in the back. Now that stand had some sort of a universal mounting arrangement because most engines are different, one from another. Really, all I work on are Jag V12s, so it's pretty much bespoke. I've got mounting points right there that just bolt hard up to the stock holes in the block. Now, it took a little while to figure out where the center of gravity was going to be, but when the engine is in this condition right here, with the indexing pin locked out away from the indexing ring, which is very similar to the rotisserie setup, it's very, very easy to rotate this engine around. Right now, the engine altogether ready to accept heads will stay in any position you place it. It must be said that at this point right now, when you put the heads on and the intakes and that sort of thing, the engine is going to get really, really top heavy on the stand. But the fact is that this is the last position the engine really needs to be in before it's taken off the stand and put in a car. So now this is version 2. Things I would change on it, I would give myself another inch right here so it's easy to get a socket and a torque wrench in between. A little better than it is right now. It's pretty tight at this point. It's kind of a fight to get it on. So I would do that. But everything else, I can actually mount a torque converter or a clutch back here with no problem. In fact, I could probably gain that inch that I want simply by moving these mounts back an inch and still have enough room to get done what I need to in the back. So there it is. This first version right here, this is actually made up of 2 Northern Tools / Harbor Freight Gorilla stands, each one rated at 1,100 pounds. But these were the ones that it just scared me to leave the engine unrestrained at the end of the day. There was just so much torque down there at the bottom of those uprights. So I basically put them end to end and welded that tube in the middle and put the indexing rings on the end of it. And this has been working great, except that it was about 2 inches too short. So that's why I made this version right here. Now it's obvious that this is a pretty big tool. And if you've got a small shop, it's going to take up a lot of space. However, when you're not using this, you could actually make this in such a way. You notice that I got the upright bolted to this end and welded to that end so that if I wanted to, I could actually take this thing apart without taking a plasma torch to it. You can actually bolt that end as well. And this upper frame would fit inside of the lower frame. You could unbolt the uprights, put them in the middle, zip tie them to the middle or the upper frame, and it wouldn't take any more than 6 inches up against the wall to store this thing. I do have some of these indexing rings laser cut on the shelf right now that we may actually put on the website for those of you that want to adapt something like this to your own engine stand. And by the way, you'll notice that there's a hole here every 30 degrees. And that's so that, for example, if you want to orient the block so that the deck is straight up and down because that's how you like to install your pistons, well, there's a hole for that. You know, every 30 degrees works great for a V12 engine. So there you have it, the Camp Chaos dedicated V12 engine stand. I think you need one of these.